I have a lot to say about the Bioshock franchise. So much to say that really it deserves its own video where I actually review the games.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
I wasn't gonna make this video. I just have too much to say about Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite. I'm not gonna talk about Bioshock 2, I've got nothing to say about it. I give Bioshock 2 a solid 7 out of 10 too much water. I've said it before, what defined Bioshock to me was a sense of narrative ambition, a desire to elevate the AAA shooter. Irrational Games is gone, and the next Bioshock game is not going to be made by its original creators. Rumors are also circulating that the next Bioshock will be a live service game because every franchise with even a drop of artistic merit has to be squeezed dry by publishers for some reason.
Fuck yeah, we put a battle royale in Fallout 76.
Do you have a shred of honor?
That's why I'm making this video. Before 2K defiles Bioshock's grave for money, I want to look back at and celebrate Bioshock's ambition. I'm going to say a lot of very mean things about Bioshock, but this video isn't called Bioshock is overrated? With a red circle somewhere and someone looking shocked in the corner of the thumbnail.
No.
This video comes from a place of love and respect for the team at Irrational for what they did, and despite that it may at times appear to be almost a contrarian hit piece, shitting on a beloved franchise of games, it is anything but that.
I'm sorry, did you need something?
They told me,
I'll get it right.
son, you're special. You were born to do great things. You know what? They were right.
What separates a man from a slave?
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, rapture can become your city as well.
The introduction of Bioshock is highly regarded, and for good reason. Obviously it's not the best video game intro ever, but it's certainly up there. I'd say it's actually the second best video game intro ever, right behind Shadow Warrior 2. Because in Shadow Warrior 2, you see rabbits humping in the opening cutscene. Twice.
Twice? 2 times.
But while Shadow Warrior 2 used its intro to show you some hot hair-on-hair action, Bioshock lays down the core themes of the game. Andrew Ryan, who's essentially Walt Disney if Walt Disney actually pulled off his plan of creating an underwater Disneyland where the Jews couldn't reach him, is, like all rich men, resentful of things like labor laws and ethics and common human decency that separates us from the squirming maggots that feed on the flesh of the dead. He's an objectivist, a philosophy championed by author Ayn Rand, whatever, which states that the proper moral purpose of one's life is the pursuit of one's own happiness. There's a lot of facets to objectivism, but what Bioshock deals with specifically is the ethics and politics of objectivism, which can basically be boiled down to fuck you, got mine. Altruism is bullshit, and morals were made up by pussies to keep you from becoming king of the world. So how does this apply in practice? Rand advocated for only the purest form of capitalism. Farm-to-table, homegrown, laissez-faire capitalism. I'm talking the real primo shit. Now, I know I sound like one of those girls on Twitter that tweets about the evils of capitalism from her soft, comfy bed, but neither me nor Bioshock, of course, is advocating for the glory of the Soviet Union. What Ayn Rand wanted, and what Bioshock criticizes, was pure capitalism. The type that doesn't currently exist, but some nutters think is a good idea.
In a free society, nobody can become a monopolist or a dictator. The system itself, the free market, will destroy you.
No minimum wage, no welfare, no labor laws of any kind. You got injured in a factory? Well, that only happened because you worked in a factory, idiot. You see, if you were smart like me, your daddy would have gotten you a desk job at his company where you're the, Sifo? I'm the Sifo. Obviously, right-wing politicians often suckle at Ayn Rand's decrepit teat.
I'd like to share a few excerpts from one of my favorite books, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham.
Although she also had dangerously liberal social ideals. She advocated for abortion, hated censorship, and detested religion and politics. Ayn Rand was a true libertarian. She didn't just adopt the parts of libertarianism that your uncle likes. She believed in personal liberty in all forms, and saw capitalism as the ultimate expression of liberty. Andrew Ryan is just a slightly less masculine Ayn Rand with an easier to pronounce name, and built Rapture to be a pure place, free of the petty morals of this so-called society. The results were about what you would expect.
Just don't hurt me. Just let me go. You keep my gun.
Rapture was destroyed by Adam. Goddamn Adam. Going around and ruining everything. You ruined my goddamn marriage, Adam! No. Adam is a substance produced by sea slugs that allows people to change their genetic makeup. It's also horribly addictive.
It's like I'm walking on sunshine.
Can be used to imbue the user with any trait they desire, and causes both mental and physical degradation. It was discovered by Dr. Tenenbaum, who also realized you could produce even more Adam by jamming one of these sea slugs into a little girl. How exactly she realized this? The game leaves to your imagination. And by that I mean, the game was aiming for a mature rating, as opposed to a no one should play this nightmare game rating. Now, a completely isolated underwater society that does not regulate the buying nor selling of goods, filling little girls with drugs that result in super-powered, super-crazy addicts, is what is referred to in sociological terms as a hellfuck nightmare world, where all that is good goes to die. But why little girls? They say the slugs produce the most Adam when inside a little girl's gut, but I certainly know the real reason they're there, because I don't want to get political. But it's much harder to kill a little girl than it is to kill a sea slug. Not just emotionally, it's quantitatively more difficult. You can just step on a slug. You gotta whip out a hacksaw if you want to crack open a little girl with the boys. The game forces you to either kill or spare little sisters. I'll try to be quick because I've talked about this before, and I'm sure as shit not the first to talk about it, period. Kill a little girl and you get a lot of Adam, which you use to become stronger. Save a little girl and you get a little Adam. You're supposed to wrestle with your morals. The objectivist thing is to prioritize your needs over that of some little girl you don't know, and the, not awful thing is to save them. Do you sacrifice your moral high ground and surrender yourself to the very pursuit of power that destroyed Rapture, or do the hard thing, the right thing, and not kill a little girl? Hey kid, I've got a little girl here. What do you say? Kill her and I'll give you $10? Or I can let her go and give you $2. Let her go? Damn, kid, you a priest or something? Alright, here's $2, you morally upstanding citizen. Not exactly the most interesting choice in the world, but I imagine the game could make me actually regret not eviscerating little girls in later levels if I find myself to be underpowered. Not to mention, if I succumbed to the temptation and snapped into a Slim Sister, it would make my journey mirror Rapture's journey, as my idealistic perception of who I am is destroyed by greed. But, yeah, you know the problem. If you save a few of them, you get a big reward of Adam, which Dr. Tenenbaum promises you when you first meet a little sister, so...
Not really relevant then, is it?
It just doesn't work. Ludonarrative dissonance. Oh my god, look at all those syllables! I'm a very smart man. Subscribe! The only thing you have to keep in mind when you go to get your sweet, sweet Adam is not your morals, but instead how much ammo you have, because they're protected by these big daddies. Absolute Chad abominations who've been grafted into diving suits and enhanced with Adam because, you know, crazy drug addicts who believe morals are bullshit are not gonna hesitate to eviscerate little girls. And those little girls are the valuable property of Fontaine Futuristics. I mean, is a man not entitled to his little girls? Fontaine is the first man who started selling products made of Adam, called plasmids, which gave every man Adam fever. Thematically, the little sisters tie beautifully into Bioshock's story, but the game's mechanics betray this. This mechanic could have really connected you with Rapture's downfall. It would have really put you in the shoes of the people you have to fight, forcing you to consider that you too are exploiting the weak in order to become strong. But Bioshock still does a fantastic job of showing you the city's downfall, even if it has to resort to showing it to you, as opposed to making you feel it through the mechanics.
I want to make them beautiful, but they always turn out wrong! That one's too fat! This one too tall! This one too symmetrical! And now, what's this, guys? An intruder! He's ugly! 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 Ugly!
With Adam came the ability to change people completely. Dr. Steinman was a plastic surgeon, who was now no longer constrained by neither law nor ability. Adam twisted his mind, gave him the ability to shape people however he wished, and because laws and running a business ethically are just libtard bullshit, he just started cutting bitches. Bioshock is pretty goddamn atmospheric, considering it's so far underwater. That's a pretty goddamn clever and original joke I just made, wow. And you, a faceless, nameless protagonist who is apparently destined for great things, washes up in the city, only to be given directions by Atlas.
Listen, I've got a family. I need to get them out of here. But the splicers have cut me off from them. If you can reach them in Neptune's bounty, then maybe, just maybe... I know you must feel like the unluckiest man in the world right now, but you're the only hope I'll ever see my wife and child again.
Aww. In order to become strong enough to save Atlas's family, you also give in to peer pressure and decide to see what's up with all this genetic modification, since all the cool kids are doing it.
Your genetic code is being rewritten. Just hold on and everything will be fine.
I don't know what I expected.
The initial hours of Bioshock are spent zapping and whacking people with a wrench, getting to grips with plasmids, and getting frustrated with the difficulty settings. You see, I started on hard because I guess I felt like a big boy.
I'm no little baby boy. I'm a big manly man.
Hold your tongue, you tiny prepubescent boy.
So I kept running out of ammo, health kits, and the Eve hypodermic needles that you use to replenish your ability to use plasmids. Bioshock's combat loop requires a constant supply of these things in order to retain your ability to not die all the time. When you run out of these things, you're essentially reduced from a superpowered Rambo to just some angry man with a wrench.
That's exactly that.
I've made a huge mistake.
When you die in Bioshock, you get respawned at the nearest Vita chamber. Enemies retain their health, you retain your items, so you just sort of fall into this state of running out of equipment and throwing yourself at them over and over and over because it just works. The game kills you quickly, yet death is not the fresh start that it is in other games. Your enemies don't return to max health, and you don't get your items back. You just sorta have to walk back to the fight again and pick up where you left off. Most games, when you die, send you to a previous save, so you just get warped back in time to before the fight. Your equipment intact, and your enemies return to full health. Bioshock places a great emphasis on scrounging for health kits, Eve hypos, and ammo. So when I decide to tangle with a big daddy, using up my equipment in the process, and die, I enter the fight again worse off than when I started. But so does the enemy since I softened up their skull in the previous fight. It becomes not a test of skill, but a battle of attrition. Fights at higher difficulties result in you just digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole, yet you can still play the game that way. You can respawn, run at every enemy with nothing but a fire in your eyes and a wrench in your hand, die, because it turns out that fire in your eyes doesn't actually mean jack shit, then come back and Groundhog Day that shit over and over until the enemy falls over. So lowering the difficulty fixed that problem, and created a whole new one. It completely neutered the game by changing Rapture from a nightmare city filled with monstrous walking abominations into Weenie Hut General. There are a lot of reasons a game should be difficult. In a game with multiple difficulty options, I always try to pick the difficulty that forces me to use every tool at my disposal. If the game wants me to set enemies on fire for armor, then the game should be hard enough in order to force me to do that. Bioshock has lots of light RPG elements where you can swap various plasmids in and out of a finite amount of slots, a big emphasis on exploration so you can gather health kits, Eve, and ammo, and even a camera you can use to do increased damage by gathering research on your enemies. All these mechanics are sound, create a nice sense of progression, and tie into the overarching story, but they're rendered useless at lower difficulties because you really don't need to bother in order to succeed. I also don't bother with the little sisters most of the time, because I just don't need the atom used to unlock new abilities. I could raise the difficulty so that I have to engage with the mechanics more, but, well, I sort of already covered that, pay attention! Bioshock's mishandling of respawning prevents higher difficulties from feeling like tough but fair learning experiences, and its lower difficulties turn Rapture into a more shallow game as the passive plasmids become meaningless and the whole game becomes a walk in the park. That being said, it's a very interesting walk. Bioshock is one of, if not the, most atmospheric games I've ever played. Atmosphere that should be supported by its difficulty. The world of Rapture is a world gone mad, with you being the last bastion of sanity. Big Daddy's steps echo off the decrepit halls of Rapture, escorting ghostly little girls, both of them living evidence of its citizens' crimes against all that is good in the world. Its citizens are twisted grotesqueries, driven mad by their pursuit of fortune, power, and beauty. But this haunting failed utopia filled with broken men and monuments to greed is betrayed by how easy it is to just exist inside of it. A game should at least be a little brutal to the player if the world in which it's set is brutal. Just a little. I'm talking mildly kinky pull my hair type shit. But at the same time, a game should always strive to feel fair, even if its setting isn't, because games are about learning from mistakes and improving. By just kicking you back to the last Vita chamber with your enemies retaining their lower health and you not retaining all your old equipment, Bioshock makes death both frustrating and meaningless, which forces the player into difficulties lower than intended, which results in a shallow joke of a combat system that diminishes Rapture's menacing atmosphere. Death becomes not a learning experience, but instead a temporary setback, as opposed to in the story where death is a very serious learning experience because Atlas's family gets fucking Can we get some F's in the chat for his family, please? The game even leans on its saddest violin chords. This is dumb. You never see Atlas's dumb face or his dumb family, so nothing with him ever emotionally resonates. Because he's never anything more than a voice in your ear. Maybe they just didn't want to do his facial animations. Regardless, after the good ol' Atlas family barbecue, you proceed to the best level in any first-person shooter ever. Shut up. Arcadia. Now you may have been wondering, how do all these people breathe? If you're anything like me, you assume they just had a big old jar of Ayn Rand's farts lying around that they just sniffed all day. But no, they use all the plants they put in Arcadia to produce the oxygen in Rapture. This level is just constant neat moments. The game is still claustrophobic, but the greenery set against the utter callousness of Rapture is really striking. These plants give you, as the player, hope. Hope that one day— oh no, Andrew Ryan ruins it. Sir, someone has been detected being hopeful in Arcadia.
Well, are they rich?
No, sir. They just spent all their money on automatic hack tools at a vending machine because hacking in this game is bullshit. They're poor.
A poor person being hopeful in my city?
But I think Ryan has just killed Arcadia. The man's put something foul into the air. Bottom of the ocean, Bio. All the oxygen comes from the trees. No trees, no oxygen.
Atlas informs you that it's time to stop fucking around and kill Andrew Ryan. Why? Because he 360 no-scoped Atlas's family, and because, I don't know, he's a dick. Look at that mustache. That is not the mustache of a good person. The game just sorta does this all the time, giving you objectives that you really shouldn't want. Oh well, I'll get into it later because the next level, Fort Frolic, is the actual best level in any first-person shooter. Friendship ended with Arcadia, now Fort Frolic is my best friend. And in it, you have to do the bidding of Sander Cohen, who is a true artiste. And by that I mean he desperately needs a boot up his ass and a gag in his mouth because he is awful.
Da 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 da! No! Oh God, you sick fuck, let me out of there! Calm down now, little moth.
He has you going around, killing his former students, taking photos of their corpses, and throwing their pictures in his quadtic, which, I'll save you the time to Google, is an art piece composed of 4 pictures. That's fucking it. Cohen is the type of artist to take a shit and call it
une merde dans un bol.
This level is fantastic, just poking fun at the egotism of truly pretentious artists.
What's that look? You don't like it, do you? I don't need to be judged by you, by anyone. Screw you! Screw all you fucking doubters! Here's what I say to all of you! Fly away, little moth! Fly!
You also see a little more of who Ryan was behind closed doors, and spoiler alert, he was awful.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan. I didn't know. I didn't know Fontaine had something to do with it. What are you doing? No, don't, please. I loved you, don't, please, no.
Now, I don't want to lose any gamer credibility, of course, but beating women is bad. Unless they interrupt my epic Fortnite moments, or tell me that the Armenian genocide actually happened. Regardless, it's a great level, but you're doing the bidding of a bastard, just because he's standing between you and Ryan. You play as a silent protagonist, he doesn't speak outside of the intro, but there's no reason he should care. Who cares about Ryan? He's just some crazy dude. The protagonist's goal should just be trying to escape Rapture because it's the worst water park ever. 2 stars, very rude staff, but the game just keeps making shit up. Go save Atlas's family, go kill Ryan, play along with some artist's nonsense. It's weak as hell, why should you care? If you dropped me into Nazi Germany all alone in 1938, do you think I'm gonna try to save some Jews then go kill Hitler? Fuck no, I'm getting the hell out of there, shit's about to go down. And the thing is, shit already went down in Rapture. It's more like Nazi Germany in 1944. Hitler's already fucked, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt were already perforating his evil little rectum. Mission accomplished, get the fuck out before the Russians force you into shitty Germany and make you enjoy Hasselhoff. It's over. Why are you here following the instructions of some dude you never met?
Is that your puppy? She's very pretty.
Thank you, Papa Sushon.
break her neck for me.
What?
Break that sweet puppy's neck.
No, please.
Break that puppy's neck. Would you kindly?
No. No.
What separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys. You think you have memories. A farm. A family. An airplane. A crash. And then this place. Was there really a family? Stop, would you kindly? Would you kindly? Powerful phrase. Familiar phrase.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly? Run! Stop! Turn. A man chooses. A slave obeys. Kill!
You are a slave, genetically engineered to do the bidding of Frank Fontaine, who was pretending to be Atlas the whole time. You never saw Atlas because Atlas was never real. You were just a tool used by Fontaine to take control of Rapture and kill Ryan. An interesting commentary on the lack of free will offered in games, which are, despite often being power fantasies, instruction-following simulators. It also ties nicely into Randian objectivism's celebration of the individual, as you are not an individual. You are, like in any game, a dog chasing objective markers. I would argue this is probably the most famous twist in video game history, and for good reason. Especially back in 2007 when Bioshock released, many games starred a silent protagonist with either little or no history at all. The silent protagonist has gone out of fashion, with even Bethesda adding a voiced protagonist to Fallout 4, which was, in my humble opinion, the worst thing to happen since some Austrian dude told Hitler his brushstrokes were shit. Regardless, it's a fun little commentary on the fact that you're just at the whims of a game's story. But the problem is that after this bombshell, the game just keeps fucking going. You've just been following a to-do list this whole time. Games aren't exercises of free will. You've just been following orders. Oh wow, I guess you're right. Interesting point. Yeah, I'm smart. Anyway, get back to the to-do list, slave! Spending the entire game building up a villain only to kill them, then switch to a new one, usually kills the pacing of a game's story. It's one of my biggest issues with Far Cry 3, and the same thing happens here. The intelligent, charismatic, and batshit crazy Ryan is replaced by Fontaine, who's just some mobster thug. You get rescued by the little sisters you've been helping, and Dr. Tenenbaum helps you get to Fontaine and kill him, and that's that. The last few hours of Bioshock are weak, the levels aren't as memorable, and there's a section where you have to play as a big daddy and protect the little sisters, which is about as fun as a wasp enema. The ending cutscene is nice though. I got the good ending, technically. I mean, I didn't really feel like a hero though, or even like a good guy. I made the smart choice, and the right choice, by saving the little sisters. One thing's for sure. It was not a hard choice. So what's to be said of Bioshock from here, our enlightened and glorious year of 2020? Well, Bioshock is an atmospheric, fun, well-crafted failure. Bioshock started a conversation, one that many are eager to drop, but I refuse to. It resulted in the term ludonarrative dissonance being coined by Clint Hawking, a game designer currently working at Ubisoft. He was the lead designer of Splinter Cell, Far Cry 2, and is currently working on Watch Dogs Legion. The idea of ludonarrative dissonance is that the ludonarrative, which is the story the game tells as a whole, is a combination of both the game's narrative, which is to say cutscenes and character interactions, and gameplay. If the gameplay is telling a story that opposes the narrative story, then the ludonarrative is dissonant. A simple example of this is Half-Life 2. In Half-Life 2, you play as Gordon Freeman, a silent protagonist with no personality, but other characters treat you like a war hero, which is weird, because when the game locks me in a room for a story section, I don't act like a war hero. I act like some high-functioning autistic super soldier throwing a temper tantrum, throwing boxes around and shooting friendly NPCs and just generally acting like a superpowered menace to society. But the game's narrative does not acknowledge my tomfoolery. So if I act like a child, and the gameplay tells the story of an angry child throwing crates around, but the story communicates that I'm a beacon of hope for the resistance, the ludonarrative is dissonant. Obviously, this is not the biggest problem in the world, and if anything makes the game funnier, as NPCs try their best to pretend that I'm not me. What was Mr. Hawking's issue with Bioshock? Well, he embraced the objectivism. Bioshock's gameplay characterized him as an awful monster tearing little girls in half so he could harvest the sweet, sweet XP they store in their stomachs. This is just Bioshock, of course. In real life, you can only gain XP from vaping a gamer girl's bathwater. Bioshock's story? He was a good guy helping others. He helped Atlas by trying to save his family, then later helped Tenenbaum and the Little Sisters by killing Fontaine. A true objectivist would have just not given a shit. They wouldn't care about helping others. Helping others is for soy boy beta cucks, of course. You can choose to be an objectivist mechanically, but the story will always force you to be acting in the interest of others. This was Hawking's primary critique. But the idea of gameplay and story working together to communicate the complete ludonarrative of a game, or opposing each other and telling two different stories, opened a can of worms. It's now been argued that a lot of games are ludonarratively dissonant. It's been applied to just about every game now. And I think we've gone too far in a few places. Ludonarrative dissonance has now been used to argue that shooters are incapable of telling a serious story. At least, no story other than sad PTSD man has PTSD and is sad about it. You gun down a million dudes, and therefore the gameplay always tells the story of a mass murderer. I mean, you can't just ignore that.
How about I do anyway?
But the problem with Bioshock's story, to me, was not all the murder. That wasn't my concern. I'm gonna be honest, I think games are just sorta shitty at character studies. They can work as long as the protagonist's goals align with the players, as in murder everything around you. But I think the strength of games is exploring your character. Who are you? When push comes to shove, are you just as awful as Ryan or Fontaine? My problem with Bioshock was that the themes were betrayed by not punishing good behavior. An objectivist is not inherently a bastard. They make the choice that's in their best interest. Making a choice that's both good for yourself and others doesn't run counter to objectivism, and it certainly isn't compelling. When I decide not to stab a hooker, that's not compelling. The hooker doesn't want me to, and I don't want to. Prison would be a rough place for me. Do you know what they do to pies in prison? When I finished Bioshock, I felt that it failed because I didn't learn anything about myself, or objectivism for that matter. Yes, I can be good when there's no punishment for being good. I know that I'm good in real life, if the only hurdle I have to clear in order to be good is not killing little girls. But if it's a dog-eat-dog world, am I just gonna start chowing down on dogs? I don't complain about Bioshock's mishandling of fail states with the stupid-ass Vita chamber, nor the little sister mechanic because I hate Bioshock. I complain about it because if Bioshock had pulled those things off, well, it could have been something really special that examined you and what you're willing to sacrifice to survive. Regardless, Bioshock started a conversation. A conversation about the story that gameplay tells, and how that story should support the overall narrative. Bioshock was a big, polished, AAA game, yet it was stuffed with real political commentary and a critique of a shitty philosophy. By trying to make profound statements and sort of failing at it, Bioshock added to game criticism. Yes, ludonarrative dissonance has been taken too far, I think. The flip side of ludonarrative dissonance is ludonarrative harmony, which is where the gameplay and story perfectly complement each other and present a powerful and cohesive overall narrative. And I've seen that before. I've played many games that have a strong overall narrative supported by the whole game, yet I feel they're never properly celebrated. I don't see the term ludonarrative harmony brought up nearly as much as I should. It just feels like ludonarrative dissonance has become this shitty trump card that people pull in order to proclaim that a game they don't like is objectively bad, or that they're very smart. Subscribe. Regardless, work on Bioshock Infinite began almost immediately following Bioshock's success. It experienced a long and troubled development. Ken Levine, the creative director of Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite, considered John Che to be his right-hand man. John Che assisted with the production side of development while Levine focused on the creative, but Che was pulled to work on Bioshock 2 at a different studio. Where Bioshock took 3 years to develop, Infinite took 5. The 60-person development team ballooned to 150, and with Levine's right-hand man busy on another project, Infinite turned into a nightmare. It was delayed 3 times. The game released was not the game that was shown, but it was released.
One goes into an experiment knowing one could fail.
One does not undertake an experiment knowing one has failed. Shall we tell him when we'll be returning?
Would that change anything?
It might give him some comfort.
At least that's something we can agree on.
Hey! Somebody meeting me here?
I'd certainly hope so.
It does seem like a dreadful place to be stranded.
Well, maybe there's someone inside.
Bioshock Infinite's prolonged development time shines through, despite its struggles. While Bioshock has begun showing its age, Infinite's remarkable attention to detail rivals that of most modern games. The animations for the smallest things, the voiced protagonist, the small details and massive environments. Infinite doesn't show its 7 years of age. So what does adding a voiced protagonist to Infinite bring to the table? Sure, Jack in the first one said a few lines on the plane, but he kept his mouth shut the rest of the game. But Booker DeWitt? Well, he's very much a real character with a journey and a past, as opposed to a vessel for the player to occupy. Speaking of, it's time to guess that character! Why is Booker DeWitt damaged? Is he A, a private eye with a drinking problem, B, a war veteran with PTSD, C, has a dead daughter, or D, been forced into a life of violence due to addiction? It's all of them. Yes, it's all of them, and I hate that. I hate that this story clearly wants to be daring and complicated, yet its protagonist seems to have been pulled off the angry video game bastard with a heart of gold shelf. The only interesting aspect of Booker is how his story ends, which we'll get to. And while he is the protagonist of Bioshock Infinite, he isn't really the emotional core of the story, which we will also get to later. As it stands, he's been told to bring some mobsters a girl and wipe away his gambling debt. What's so special about this girl, you may ask? Where even is she, you may also ask? Well, apparently she lives here.
10,000 feet. Hallelujah.
A beautiful city in the clouds named Columbia, specifically in this angel statue. How nice. I imagine the property taxes are ridiculous. But oh, Booker. On his way there, he gets into some trouble.
Sorry, no sale.
Silly? There's never a charge for the raffle. You've been sleeping under a rock?
77.
77. That's a lucky number. I'll be rooting for you.
Bring me the bowl! Is that not the prettiest young white girl in all of Columbia? All right then. The winner is Oh, what do you know?
Number 77, come and claim your prize!
First throw!
Let's talk about this. Bioshock Infinite came out in 2013. But if it came out today, well, it would be accused of being SJW, soy boy, new male, blue-pilled, buzzword, BuzzFeed propaganda. Where Bioshock was an indictment of Randian objectivism and the libertarian ideals it goes hand in hand with, Infinite is instead an indictment of nationalism, although basically fascism. It's fascism adjacent. At the very least, they live next door to each other.
Hey, fuckers! Welcome to the neighborhood! My name is Craig.
The people of Colombia have a love of America that is religious and sorta bordering on fetishistic. The founding fathers are depicted as sexy-ass Greek gods. Anyone that isn't whiter than a Romney family photo is dangerously ethnic. And the leader of Colombia is not a charismatic businessman who dared to ask the question,
is a man not entitled to tell the IRS to get fucked?
The leader is Comstock, a man who's portrayed as a Moses-like figure by himself. While the people of Rapture were devoted to Ryan's ideals, the people of Colombia are devoted to Comstock himself. So here's the problem with this. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? Is an interesting question. To what extent can an organization control its people? Where's the line drawn? What separates a man from a slave? By what right does the government take my money and give it to recovering crackheads and their retarded sisters? While I don't agree with Ryan, I understand him. Your answer to his question is also, if you're not insane, nuanced. Unless you're one of those taxation is theft or seize the means of production nutters, your answer to how much sweat you can hold on to probably has a lot of layers to it and sort of defines what you think society should be. But Comstock, what's his big question? Is a man not entitled to jerk off John Wilkes Booth with one hand while slapping a colored boy with the other? The only answer to Comstock's question is no, you fucking maniac. Rapture's downfall was also a result of the rotten foundation it was built on. A society built on fuck you got mine will eat itself as everyone is locked in a race to the bottom and committing terrible acts in the name of their own self-interest. Everyone seeking to out-bastard each other. You weren't the cause of Rapture's downfall. You were just a result of it. A genetically engineered murder slave, because Rapture had devolved to a point where genetically engineering murder slaves was totally normal. But in Colombia? Well, there's a primarily black revolutionary group known as the Vox Populi, who are just generally feeling disenfranchised and angry and like the system is set against them, and just drop it. But there's also a prophecy created by Comstock himself. A false shepherd with his hand branded AD is destined to lead the lamb astray.
Please, what are you doing?
Come on! Are you gonna throw it? Or are you taking your coffee black these days?
Mediocre at best!
Oh! Looks like we've got a shy one here!
Bitch!
Wait! It's him!
Now, where'd you get that brand, boy? Don't you know that makes you the backstabbing snake in the grass false shepherd?
And we ain't letting no false shepherd into our flock. Show them what we got planned, boys!
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Infinite's combat is explosive. Bioshock's moment-to-moment gameplay was wandering through Rapture's decrepit halls, digging through trash cans and avoiding security cameras. As opposed to Infinite, where you spend the whole game BFGing fascists in the goddamn balls. In Bioshock, you showed up after the fall of Rapture, but in Infinite, you are the fall of Columbia. The RPG mechanics have been dumbed down, but I don't mind because I'm dumb. They weren't particularly deep to begin with, and while there are fewer plasmids total, each brings something a little different to the fight. Infinite also carries over the weak-ass respawn system of Bioshock. It still sucks and prevents death from being a learning experience, but since Columbia doesn't really feel dangerous like Rapture, it doesn't undercut the atmosphere. And since there are no mechanics that explore the themes of the game, whoops, would you look at that? The axe I've been grinding in the background of this critique is beginning to spark. The fact that the game isn't hard enough to force me to engage with the mechanics just doesn't matter really. If one thing defines Infinite, it's explosions! Everything you touch turns into an explosive set piece, and while it sounds like I'm getting ready to say this is dumb and over the top, I really like it. Not because it's deep or anything, but because explosions are fun and I'm not made of stone. And I suppose it helps reinforce the fact that Booker kills 10 men before breakfast every morning. Regardless, after being propelled to the massive angel statue purely from the force of the constant explosions that seem to be generated by Booker's mere existence, you meet the Lamb.
Whoa! Whatever that was, it's got nothing to do with the job at hand.
Elizabeth has been trapped in the angel statue her whole life. You rescue her, and the world's most possessive boyfriend, a giant bird robot, attacks you. Booker calls upon his power to generate explosions through sheer force of will, and you escape to the surface. Elizabeth is your follower for most of the game, is invincible to enemy damage, has a plucky personality despite being trapped in an awful world her whole life, possesses the power to open locked doors, and wait a second!
As soon as we clean him up, I'm sure you'll recognize him. There. Look familiar?
Yep, she's just Alex from Half-Life. Although, you know, there are worse developers to copy than Valve. I mean, that's for damn sure. People like Alex. This guy really likes Alex. Why? Elizabeth can help you out in combat by tossing you supplies. She can toss you salts, which you need in order to use vigors. Vigors are like plasmids, except... Elizabeth is definitely a manic pixie dream girl, which is an archetype I usually hate. But she's likable enough and has some tragedy to her which I find compelling. As opposed to Booker, the most tragic man to ever exist.
It all began on the day of my actual birth. Both of my parents failed to show up.
Booker has been spending his whole life just getting shit on so he could reach the minimum tragic quota to star in his own video game. But you really should play as Elizabeth. Her ability to tear holes into other dimensions could be a really cool gameplay mechanic, but then there wouldn't be a lighthouse. And there's always a lighthouse, I guess. There's also always plasmids, because it's Bioshock. They don't even really tie into the story. Remember in Bioshock when you first injected yourself with a plasmid and it was violent because plasmids were sort of fucked up and that's why the city destroyed itself? Well, that happens with every single vigor in Bioshock Infinite, and while the animations are doubtlessly incredibly impressive, it just doesn't land in the story. No one is screaming crazy shit about being too spliced up, some people just have superpowers, and that's it. It has zero story implications. They could have at least thrown in something like, side effects of vigors may include interdimensional fuckery, developing an attachment to a giant robot bird, and being super racist for some reason. Now you can tear holes into other dimensions in Infinite's gameplay. You choose which of a few things you want brought in to help you in combat. Elizabeth goes interdimensionally shopping and brings you those health kits that you put on the shopping list, and you can't really do anything interesting with this mechanic. You're given a few options, you pick one of them, and that's essentially the extent of it. It's not a mechanic that makes you think about, I don't know, parallel dimensions or whatever. The only thing this mechanic makes me think is, do I want health kits or shotgun ammo? It never feels very meaningful. You're presented with a few choices, you pick one of them, and none of them matter. Bioshock Infinite's story is also filled with meaningless choices. It's a commentary on... Hold on. Hey, Did you know that you really just follow instructions in games and aren't exercising free will? Did I blow your mind? It's okay. I'll wait a minute. For Infinite to just go back to Bioshock's original observation about your lack of agency in a linear game feels downright insulting. It's also yet another thing the story has to juggle, and trust me when I say, it's already juggling way too much shit. Bioshock Infinite's story has a lot of things going on. The songbird is actually meant to represent an abusive partner. Booker's a commentary on how first-person shooters are bloodbaths, and he sort of has to be a psycho. Columbia is a fascist nightmare with a facade of golly gee willikers, isn't it swell here? And there is of course the alternate dimensions and goddamn time travel. For the life of me, can't really say what Bioshock Infinite is about. What exactly it's trying to say. Bioshock was a harsh criticism of Randian objectivism. The plasmids, little sisters, big daddies, and the city's mad scientists and fruity artists were all a result of a society that had thrown morals out the goddamn window. How do the vigors relate to fascism? Or Elizabeth's portal powers? Clint Hawking's short critique on Bioshock was subtitled, "The Problem of What the Game is About." And while Bioshock's mechanics and narrative were conflicted when it came to communicating its themes, they were trying. Bioshock Infinite, despite having enough themes to center a dozen games around, doesn't explore any of them mechanically. It's just so disappointing playing this game that has so much to say, yet seems incapable of calming the fuck down for a minute and just speaking. Before I continue grinding this axe down to a point where it's just a knife with a weirdly long handle, I want to make something clear. There are great moments in this story. It is by no means bad. It's a fucking mess and is needlessly obtuse, but Elizabeth is interesting, and her arc really has some emotional moments. Looking into Infinite's development shows she was a major focus, and was also, as I joked about earlier, very much inspired by Alex in Half-Life 2. Irrational Games spent years working on her, from her AI to her animations to her actual story, and it shows. She works. She's undoubtedly the best part of this story, and while her Disney-looking puppy dog I have an ass is pandering super goddamn hard, in this tangled mess of a story, her journey shines through. Games can get away with having obtuse stories. I love Bloodborne, put it on PC, you fucking hacks, and Dark Souls. The thing is, in those games, I'm never subjected to the story. There are cutscenes at the beginning, the end, and a few emo NPCs sprinkled throughout the game. You can choose to ignore all of it. But when a game is constantly stopping everything in order to tell a story, and that game is like 15 hours long, I should have no issue telling you just what the story is about. Now, I suppose people will make the argument this game is just too galaxy-brained for me to understand it, to which I say, this is the gameplay.
How it feels to chew 5 gum. New 5 gum. Stimulate your senses.
This game's plot isn't so complex, because it's just that goddamn deep, dude. Booker is Elizabeth's dad. Booker is Comstock from another dimension or timeline or whatever, fuck you. Booker's daughter, Elizabeth, was interdimensionally raising Arizona'd by the fucking Wonder Twins. The Wonder Twins are just parallel dimension versions of each other. I get it, I understand. What I don't understand is how this relates to fascists in the clouds. I get that Elizabeth is split between dimensions and that's why she can tear holes into other ones. I just don't get how that relates to goddamn flying racists building a giant bird robot and stealing plasmids from Rapture. What's the payoff for that? That's what I was wondering my first playthrough. What is the point behind all this space-time bending nonsense?
There are a million worlds. All different and all similar. Constants and variables.
What?
There's always a lighthouse. There's always a man. There's always a city.
How do you know this?
I can see them through the doors.
Yeah, it was all to excuse the fact that there are still plasmids and a crazy dude and a city in a place where you don't normally build cities. All the space-time bending nonsense exists only to justify that this Bioshock game is, indeed, upon closer inspection, Bioshock. Could Infinite have not had plasmids, and a lighthouse, and a city ruled by some crazy guy? Yeah, and honestly, I think that would have made it one of the best games ever made.
There are loved ones in the glory whose dear forms you often miss when you close your earthly story. Will you join them in their bliss?
If my channel had a slogan, it would be, I bitch and moan because I care. I don't really talk about games that I just outright hate, at least not anymore. Even games that I have a lot of issues with, I'll specifically focus in on the things that I really like. If this was a review, it would be glowing, but as a critique, it's going to be pretty rough. That's a direct quote from the third paragraph of Hawking's blog post, where he unwittingly spawned a brand new term in game criticism. Clint Hawking wrote an essay asserting that the celebrated first-person shooter game Bioshock was bad. That's a quote from Danny Paez in June of this year, referencing that exact blog post. Criticism is gone. Genuine attempts at discussion have dissipated as hot takes and takedowns have become the primary means through which games are discussed. Well, it's become the primary means through which goddamn everything is discussed, but let's just keep it to games. There's a reason I glossed over the Vox Populi. Hawking's short blog post is scathing. He dragged Bioshock through the mud and in the process made game criticism better. Until, you know, the 2010s happened, and we all turned into desperate click farmers that didn't read the goddamn thing we're criticizing. Third paragraph. Unbelievable. If this video was a review, it would be glowing. But as a critique, or retrospective, or meme conveyor belt, or ramblings of a madman, or whatever the fuck it is that my videos are supposed to be, it's been pretty rough because I love these games. I love their combat, I love their stories, I love how goddamn hard they tried. The utter artistry that drips from every environment and character and enemy, there is unmistakable talent and passion behind these games, and they were clearly made with love. The best thing Bioshock did was fail. I firmly believe that its failure improved video game storytelling. Infinite frustrates me because it's so goddamn good. Its story is, despite its messy nature, still far better than a vast majority of games. It just lacked that laser focus that Bioshock had. Its gameplay is fun and bombastic, but they just don't support each other, not in any interesting way that really makes me reflect on anything. And why was it so messy? Was it due to its chaotic development? Was it because it felt some compulsion to explain while it still had a lighthouse, a man, a city, and plasmids? Why isn't there a mechanic that really explores its themes? Were they afraid to implement such a mechanic because it may actually oppose the story? Maybe it's all of these things. Maybe it's none of them. Baptism is a common motif in Infinite, and Booker, as I said, has a dark past, and he has a dark future. So he gets a final baptism that finally washes away his sins.
Use Zachary Comstock. Use Booker DeWitt.
No. I'm both.
I think this is what Infinite wanted to be. A man that couldn't escape his violent past, an indictment of religion, and the inherent lie that all evil misdeeds can be washed away if you just swear fealty to whatever god. A meditation on the cyclical nature of violence. Is that what it wanted to be, or am I assuming too much? I have no idea. I can't tell you what in God's name Infinite was trying to say. Did you know the original plan for Bioshock 2 was to have you play as a little sister without her big daddy? It was going to be a survival horror game. examining the objectivist philosophy from an inherently terrifying angle. Not the strong exploiting or protecting the weak, but as the weak. But I was told, I don't even remember by who, it could have just been marketing person X. We think Bioshock can be a big shooter franchise like Gears of War or Call of Duty. And I thought, good lord, why did you hire me? They always told me, son, you're special. You were born to do great things. Games fade quickly into the past, far quicker than any other medium. It's just the nature of it. But Bioshock won't. Bioshock can't. Because it tried so hard and failed that it left an impact on the medium that I think will last as long as the medium itself. And as we rapidly approach what I have no doubt will be a soulless shell of a Bioshock reboot, I just wanted to preserve that beautiful failure.